Right now, somewhere in your life, there is a gap between where you are and where you actually want to be. Maybe it shows up as a goal you keep putting off, a habit you keep promising to change, or a version of yourself you know exists but have not fully become yet. You are not lazy and you are not broken. You simply never learned how to train your mind the same careful way people train their bodies. This audiobook is going to change that. Over the next 10 chapters, you will learn exactly how to build a disciplined mind, one capable of pushing through fear, staying consistent when motivation disappears, controlling emotions under pressure, and turning failure into something useful instead of something painful. You will learn how small daily choices, the ones that feel too small to matter, actually decide the entire direction of your future. You will learn how to replace habits that hold you back with simple actions that move you forward, one day at a time. None of this requires talent you do not already have. It requires practice, patience, and a willingness to show up for yourself, especially on the days when showing up feels hard. By the end of this journey, you will not just understand discipline as an idea, you will know how to build it, strengthen it, and use it to create real, lasting change in your daily life. So take a breath, get comfortable, and let's begin building the mind capable of achieving everything you have been working toward. Chapter 1. Train your mind daily to build lasting mental strength. The mind is the one instrument you carry into every single moment of your life, and yet most people never learn how to play it. They wake up, they react, they scroll, they worry, they complain, and they call this living. But there is another way to exist in this world, a way where the mind becomes your greatest ally instead of your greatest obstacle. This chapter is about that transformation. It is about waking up to the truth that mental strength is not something you are born with in fixed supply. It is something you build, one decision at a time, the same way a blacksmith builds a blade through repeated strikes of the hammer against hot metal. Your mind is that metal, and discipline is the hammer. Most people believe that mental strength shows up only during a crisis. They think that when the storm comes, somehow they will find the strength to stand tall, even though they have done nothing to prepare for it. This is a dangerous illusion. Strength does not appear out of nowhere, in the moment you need it most. It appears because you built it, quietly, patiently, on all the ordinary days when nobody was watching and nothing dramatic was happening. The soldier does not become brave on the battlefield. He becomes brave in the years of training before he ever steps onto it. The same law applies to you. If you want to be strong when life tests you, you must train your mind long before the test arrives. Think about your body for a moment. If you wanted to get physically strong, you would not expect your muscles to grow by simply wishing for it. You would understand instinctively that you need to place your body under resistance again and again, that you need to break it down slightly so it can rebuild itself stronger. Nobody questions this process when it comes to the body, but when it comes to the mind, people expect strength to appear without any resistance at all. They want peace without practicing stillness. They want focus without ever training their attention. They want resilience without ever choosing to sit with discomfort. This is where the disconnect begins, and this is exactly where you are going to change course. Training your mind daily does not require hours of your day. It requires consistency more than intensity. A person who spends 10 focused minutes a day working on their mind for a year will become far stronger than someone who spends 3 hours once and never returns to the practice again. The mind responds to repetition the same way a muscle responds to consistent movement. Small, steady effort compounds over time into something that looks, from the outside, like natural talent. But it is not talent. It is discipline wearing the mask of talent. The first step in training your mind is learning to observe your thoughts instead of being controlled by them. Right now, in this moment, thoughts are moving through your head, and most of the time you treat every single one of them as true simply because it appeared. A thought says you are not good enough, and you accept it as fact. A thought says you should give up, and you treat it like wisdom. But a thought is not truth. A thought is just a visitor passing through your mind, and you get to decide whether that visitor stays for dinner or gets shown the door. The moment you understand that you are not your thoughts, but the one who observes your thoughts, you gain a kind of power that most people never discover in their entire lives. Sit quietly for 5 minutes each morning. Do nothing but notice what your mind produces. You will be surprised how much noise it creates when left unmanaged. This is not weakness on your part. This is simply what an untrained mind does. Your job now is to become the trainer. The second part of building mental strength is learning to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. Every time you avoid something difficult, you are teaching your mind that discomfort is dangerous and must be escaped immediately. Every time you stay present with something hard, whether it is a difficult conversation, a demanding task, or simply an uncomfortable emotion, you are teaching your mind the opposite lesson. You are teaching it that discomfort can be tolerated, and even more than that, you are teaching it that discomfort is often the exact place where growth happens. Cold showers, hard workouts, difficult conversations, waking up early when your body wants to stay in bed. These are not just productivity hacks. They are training grounds for your mind. They are small, repeated proofs to yourself that you can do hard things and survive them. And once your mind believes that, fear starts to lose its grip on you. Consider how children learn to walk. They fall down more times than anyone can count, yet nobody tells a toddler to give up, because falling means they are not built for walking. The falling is expected. It is part of the process. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, most people lose this understanding. They start believing that struggle means something is wrong with them, instead of understanding that struggle simply means they are in the middle of becoming something new. Your mind grows stronger the same way a toddler learns to walk, through repeated attempts, repeated stumbles, and the quiet decision to stand back up one more time than you fall. A disciplined mind also requires you to guard what you feed it. You would not pour poison into your body and expect to feel healthy. Yet many people consume hours of negativity, gossip, comparison, and mindless noise, then wonder why their mind feels heavy and weak. What you consume daily shapes what your mind believes is normal. If you constantly expose yourself to complaints, fear, and distraction, your mind will start to mirror that energy back into your life. If instead you feed your mind with books that challenge you, conversations that elevate you, and quiet moments that clear you, your mind will begin to reflect that strength back into your actions. This is not about pretending problems do not exist. It is about choosing, deliberately, what you allow to shape your inner world. Journaling is one of the most underrated tools for training the mind. Each night, take a few minutes to write down what challenged you that day and how you responded to it. This simple habit forces you to become aware of patterns you would otherwise repeat blindly. You start to notice when fear made your decisions instead of clarity. You start to notice when you reacted instead of responded. Awareness is the beginning of change, because you cannot fix what you refuse to see. A mind that reflects becomes a mind that improves, while a mind that never looks inward stays trapped in the same cycles year after year. Breathing is another tool that people overlook simply because it seems too simple to matter. But in moments of stress, your breath becomes shallow and quick, which signals danger to your nervous system, even if there is no real danger present. When you slow your breath down deliberately, you send a different signal. You tell your body and mind that you are safe, that you are in control, that there is no need to panic. Practicing slow, deep breathing daily, even for just a few minutes, trains your nervous system to return to calm more quickly when life throws chaos at you. This is not a small thing. This is one of the most practical tools you have for staying steady when everything around you feels unsteady. Mental strength also grows through the discipline of finishing what you start, even when it becomes boring or difficult. Every time you quit something, simply because it stopped feeling exciting, you weaken your mind's trust in your own word. But every time you follow through, even on something small, You build evidence that you are someone who keeps promises to yourself. This matters more than people realize. Your relationship with yourself is built the same way any relationship is built, through kept promises over time. If you constantly break promises to yourself, your mind will stop believing you when you say you are going to change. But if you start keeping small promises, waking up when you said you would, finishing the task you committed to, staying quiet when you said you would listen, your mind begins to trust you again. And a mind that trusts itself becomes unstoppable. There will be days when your mind feels weak, when doubt creeps in, when you wonder if any of this effort is making a difference. This is normal, and it does not mean you are failing. Growth is rarely visible in the moment it is happening. A tree does not look different from one day to the next, yet given enough days, it becomes something enormous. Your mind works the same way. The daily practice of observing your thoughts, sitting with discomfort, guarding what you consume, reflecting through journaling, breathing with intention, and following through on your word. These small acts are not dramatic, but they are the exact things that build a mind capable of carrying you through anything life presents. Understand this clearly. You are not trying to become someone who never struggles. You are training to become someone who can hold steady inside the struggle. That is what mental strength actually means. It is not the absence of fear, doubt, or difficulty. It is the presence of a mind that has been trained enough to stay calm and clear, even when those things show up. This is available to you starting today, not someday in the future when conditions feel more convenient. The training begins the next time a hard thought arrives and you choose to observe it instead of obey it. It begins the next time discomfort shows up and you choose to stay instead of run. It begins the moment you decide that your mind deserves the same daily discipline you would give anything else you wanted to master. Every version of yourself that you admire, the calm one, the confident one, the resilient one, is built through repetition, not luck. Start small, stay consistent, trust the process even when you cannot see the results yet. Your mind is listening to every choice you make about it, and over time, it will become exactly what you trained it to be. Chapter 2. Replace bad habits with small, consistent daily actions now. Every habit you have today, good or bad, was built the same way, through repetition small enough that you barely noticed it happening. Nobody wakes up one morning and suddenly develops a habit of checking their phone 200 times a day. It starts with one glance, then another, until the behavior becomes so automatic that it happens before conscious thought even enters the picture. This is both the danger and the opportunity hidden inside every habit. If small repeated actions built the habits holding you back, then small repeated actions can just as easily build the habits that move you forward. You do not need a dramatic overhaul of your entire life. You need a different set of small actions, repeated consistently, until they become as automatic as the ones you are trying to leave behind. Most people approach change the wrong way. They wait for motivation to strike, and when it does, they try to transform everything at once. They quit sugar, wake up at 5, start exercising daily, stop procrastinating, and commit to reading every night, all starting the same Monday. For about 4 days this works, fueled entirely by excitement. Then life happens. Work gets stressful, sleep gets disrupted, one thing slips, and because everything was tied together in one giant burst of willpower, the whole structure collapses at once. This is not a failure of character. It is a failure of strategy. Willpower is a limited resource, much like a battery that drains throughout the day. Relying on it as your primary tool for change will eventually leave you stranded. The better path is smaller than your pride wants it to be. Instead of committing to exercise for an hour daily, commit to putting on your shoes and stepping outside for 5 minutes. Instead of promising to read 50 pages a night, promise yourself 1 page. This might sound too small to matter, and that feeling of it being too small is exactly the point. When a goal feels laughably easy, your mind does not resist it. There is no internal argument, no negotiation, no excuse convincing enough to skip it. And because you show up, even in this small way, day after day, you start collecting evidence that you are someone who follows through. That evidence becomes the foundation everything else gets built on. Bad habits do not disappear simply because you decide to stop them through sheer force. Willpower alone rarely wins against a habit that has been reinforced for months or years. What actually works is understanding the pattern behind the habit and interrupting it at the root. Every habit follows a similar shape. Something triggers the urge, you perform the behavior, and you receive some form of reward, whether that reward is comfort, distraction, or relief from boredom. If you want to remove a bad habit, you cannot simply delete this pattern. You have to replace the behavior in the middle while keeping the trigger and reward mostly intact. If stress sends you toward junk food, the trigger is stress and the reward is comfort. Instead of eliminating the craving entirely, replace the middle step. When stress hits, go for a short walk, call someone you trust, or breathe deeply for 2 minutes. You are not fighting the urge head-on. You are redirecting it towards something that serves you instead of harms you. Environment plays a much larger role in behavior than most people admit. You can have the strongest intentions in the world, but if your environment constantly pulls you toward the habit you are trying to break, you will exhaust yourself fighting a battle that could have been avoided through better design. If you are trying to stop mindless phone scrolling, keep your phone in another room while you work. If you are trying to eat healthier, do not keep tempting snacks stocked in your kitchen. If you are trying to wake up earlier, place your alarm across the room so you physically have to stand up to turn it off. These adjustments seem minor, yet they remove friction from good choices and add friction to bad ones. Over time, this shift in environment does more heavy lifting than motivation ever could. Consistency matters far more than intensity when building a new habit. A short walk every single day will change your life more than an intense workout you do once and never repeat. One page read nightly compounds into dozens of books over the years. 5 minutes of quiet reflection each morning compounds into a mind that handles stress with far more clarity. The results of small, consistent action are invisible in the short term, which is exactly why so many people abandon the process too early. They expect to feel transformed within a week and give up when they do not. But habits work more like planting a seed underground. For a long stretch, nothing visible seems to be happening, even though roots are quietly forming beneath the surface. Then one day, seemingly out of nowhere, growth breaks through. That growth was never sudden. It was earned in all the invisible days before it appeared. Tracking your habits, even in the simplest way, strengthens your commitment to them. A single mark on a calendar for each day you follow through creates a visual chain that you naturally do not want to break. This is not about becoming obsessive over perfection. Missing one day does not undo weeks of progress, no matter how much your mind may try to convince you otherwise. The real danger is not one missed day, it is missing 2 days in a row, because that is when a temporary slip starts turning into a new pattern. If you miss a day, treat it as an isolated moment, not evidence of failure. Return to the action the very next day without guilt weighing you down. Guilt rarely fuels lasting change. It usually just adds shame on top of an already difficult moment. Replacing a bad habit is not about becoming a different person overnight. It is about becoming, very slightly, a slightly better version of yourself today than you were yesterday. Stack enough of these slight improvements together, and eventually you look back and barely recognize the person you used to be. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because you showed up, in small ways, on ordinary days, when nobody else was watching and nothing felt urgent. Start today with one small action so easy you cannot talk yourself out of it. Repeat it tomorrow, then the next day. This is how transformation actually happens, not through grand declarations, but through the quiet, steady accumulation of small choices made consistently over time. Chapter 3. Face your fears and grow stronger through discomfort daily. Fear visits every person who has ever lived, and it will visit you today, tomorrow, and every day after that. This is not a flaw in your character. It is simply the mind doing its ancient job of trying to keep you safe. The problem is not that fear exists. The problem is that most people organize their entire lives around avoiding it, shrinking their choices, their conversations, and their ambitions until fear has quietly taken control of the steering wheel. The person you want to become is on the other side of feelings you have been avoiding. Growth has never lived in the comfortable places. It lives exactly where discomfort begins. Consider what fear actually feels like inside your body. Your chest tightens, your breathing shortens, your palms sweat, your thoughts race toward every possible way things could go wrong. This physical response was designed for genuine danger, for moments when your ancestors needed to escape a predator or defend their survival. But most of the fear you experience today is not physical danger at all. It is the fear of rejection when you speak up in a meeting. It is the fear of failure when you start something new. It is the fear of judgment when you choose a path different from everyone around you. Your body still reacts as though a predator is chasing you, even though the only thing actually threatening you is a thought. Once you understand this, fear starts to lose some of its authority over your decisions. The relationship between fear and courage is often misunderstood. People believe courageous individuals simply do not feel fear, that somewhere along the way they became immune to it. This is not true. Courage has never meant the absence of fear. It means acting despite its presence. The person who walks into a difficult conversation with shaking hands and still speaks their truth is far more courageous than someone who never feels fear at all, because courage requires something to push against. Every time you act while afraid, you are not proving that fear was wrong to appear. You are proving that fear does not get to make your decisions for you anymore. Discomfort works like a doorway rather than an obstacle. On one side of that doorway is the familiar, the safe, the predictable version of your life that you already know completely. On the other side is everything you have not yet become. The only way through that doorway is discomfort itself, because growth by definition requires you to leave behind what you already are. A caterpillar does not become a butterfly by staying exactly as it was, comfortable and unchanged. It goes through a period of intense, uncomfortable transformation before anything resembling wings appears. Your growth follows the same pattern. The discomfort you feel when trying something new, speaking up, or taking a risk is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that transformation is underway. Facing fear daily does not mean throwing yourself into your greatest terror every single morning. It means practicing with small, manageable doses of discomfort so consistently that your capacity to handle bigger challenges grows over time. If public speaking terrifies you, you do not need to book a stadium appearance tomorrow. You can start by speaking up once in a small meeting or recording yourself talking for 2 minutes and watching it back. If confrontation frightens you, you do not need to pick your biggest fight first. You can practice saying no to something small or expressing a mild disagreement with someone you trust. Each small act of facing discomfort trains your nervous system to understand that these situations, while uncomfortable, are survivable. Over time, what once felt unbearable starts to feel merely uncomfortable, and what once felt uncomfortable starts to feel manageable. There is a particular kind of freedom that arrives the moment you stop needing everything to feel comfortable before you act. Most people wait for fear to disappear before they take the leap, but fear rarely disappears on its own. It only shrinks after you have already moved through it enough times that your mind stops treating it as a threat. This means the waiting itself is often the trap. You are not actually waiting for the right moment or the right amount of confidence. You are waiting for a feeling that will only show up after you have already done the very thing you are afraid to do. Action comes first. Confidence follows behind it, not the other way around. Physical discomfort offers one of the most direct ways to train this skill, because it gives you a controlled environment to practice staying calm under pressure. A hard workout, a cold shower, a long walk in uncomfortable weather. These are not just about physical fitness. They are rehearsals for your mind. Each time your body wants to quit and you choose to continue anyway, you are reinforcing a story inside yourself that you are someone who does not immediately retreat from difficulty. This story matters more than people realize, because your mind constantly references your past behavior when deciding how to respond to new challenges. If your history is filled with quitting the moment things become uncomfortable, your mind will predict that same outcome for future difficulties. If your history is filled with staying, even in small uncomfortable moments, your mind will start predicting that you are capable of enduring far more than you once believed. Fear also tends to grow larger the longer it stays unexamined. A worry left alone in your mind, replayed over and over without action, expands until it feels far bigger than the actual situation deserves. But the moment you take even one small step toward the thing you fear, that fear often shrinks immediately, because reality is rarely as harsh as imagination made it out to be. The conversation you dreaded turns out to be manageable. The rejection you feared turns out to be survivable. The failure you avoided for years turns out to teach you something valuable instead of destroying you. Most fear lives entirely in anticipation. Very little of it survives contact with actual experience. None of this means discomfort should be chased carelessly, or that pain itself is the goal. The goal is growth, and discomfort simply happens to be the price that growth often demands. You are not seeking suffering for its own sake. You are choosing to stop letting temporary discomfort control permanent decisions about the direction of your life. Every person you admire for their strength, their confidence, or their resilience became that way through repeated exposure to situations that once terrified them. They were not born fearless. They simply decided, again and again, that the life they wanted mattered more than the comfort they were used to. Start today by identifying one small discomfort you have been avoiding, something manageable enough that it does not overwhelm you, but real enough that it makes your chest tighten slightly when you think about doing it. Do that one thing, then find another tomorrow. This is how fear loses its grip, not through one dramatic act of bravery, but through the daily practice of choosing growth over comfort, one small uncomfortable step at a time. Chapter 4. Set clear goals and stay focused until you win. A ship without a destination will never find the right wind, no matter how skilled the sailor or how strong the crew. It will simply drift, pushed around by whatever current happens to pass beneath it, mistaking motion for progress. This is how most people move through their years, busy but directionless, active but unclear about what any of that activity is building toward. A goal is what turns motion into progress. It gives your energy a target, and without that target, even your hardest effort scatters in a dozen directions and accomplishes very little of lasting value. Vague wishes are not goals, even though people often confuse the two. Wanting to be successful, wanting to be healthier, wanting a better life, these are directions without destinations. They feel good to say, but they give your mind nothing concrete to work with. A goal becomes powerful the moment it becomes specific enough that you would know, without question, whether you achieved it or not. Wanting to get in shape is a wish. Committing to run 3 times a week for the next 3 months is a goal. Wanting to build a better career is a wish. Committing to apply to 5 new opportunities every month until you land one is a goal. The specificity is not a minor detail. It is the entire mechanism that turns intention into result. Clarity matters because your mind cannot pursue what it cannot clearly picture. Think about walking through a thick fog compared to walking on a clear day toward a mountain you can see in the distance. In the fog, every step feels uncertain, and it becomes easy to wander off course without even noticing. On a clear day, you can adjust your path instantly because you always know exactly where you are heading. A clear goal acts like that visible mountain. It lets you check, at any moment, whether your current actions are moving you closer or pulling you further away. Without that clarity, you can spend months working hard while actually drifting sideways, because busyness was mistaken for direction. Writing your goal down is not a symbolic exercise. It is a practical tool that changes how your mind treats the goal. A thought that stays only in your head is fragile, easily reshaped by mood, easily forgotten under stress, easily replaced by whatever feels urgent in the moment. A goal written on paper becomes something your mind can return to again and again, unaffected by how you happen to feel on any given day. Keep it somewhere visible. Read it in the morning before the noise of the day begins to pull your attention elsewhere. This small habit keeps your direction fresh in your mind, even during the weeks when progress feels slow and motivation feels thin. Big goals often overwhelm people not because the goal itself is unreasonable, but because they try to hold the entire distance in their mind at once. Staring at the full size of a massive undertaking can freeze anyone into inaction. The solution is to break the goal into pieces small enough that each one feels completely achievable on its own. If your goal is to write a book, the goal is not write a book. The goal is to write for 30 minutes today. If your goal is to build a business, the goal is not build a successful business. The goal is to complete one specific task connected to that business this week. Large achievements are never built in a single leap. They are built through a long sequence of smaller, specific actions, each one manageable on its own, each one connected to the larger direction you have chosen. Focus is the discipline that protects your goal once you have set it. Setting a goal is easy compared to staying focused on it once daily life starts pulling your attention in 100 different directions. Distraction rarely announces itself as distraction. It disguises itself as urgency, as opportunity, as something that seems important in the moment but has nothing to do with where you said you wanted to go. Staying focused means learning to ask, before giving your time and energy to something, whether this action actually serves the direction you have chosen. If the answer is no, you are allowed to say no to it as well, even if it looks appealing on the surface. Obstacles will appear the moment you commit seriously to any meaningful goal, and this should be expected, rather than treated as a sign that something has gone wrong. The path toward anything worthwhile is rarely a straight line. There will be setbacks, slow periods, moments where progress seems to stall completely, no matter how much effort you put in. What separates people who eventually reach their goals from those who abandon them is not the absence of these obstacles. It is the decision to keep moving despite them. Every person who has built something meaningful faced a version of this exact resistance and simply refused to let it become the final answer. Focus also requires patience with a timeline that rarely matches your original expectations. Most goals take longer to achieve than people initially hope, and this gap between expectation and reality causes many people to quit right before real progress would have appeared. Growth toward a goal is rarely visible in a straight upward line. It moves in stages, with long stretches that feel like nothing is happening, followed by sudden leaps forward that make sense only in hindsight. If you judge your progress purely by how things feel on any single day, you will constantly feel behind, even when you are exactly on schedule for something meaningful. Trust the process you have committed to and keep showing up for it, even during the stretches that offer no visible reward. Revisit your goal regularly, not to obsess over how far you still have to go, but to confirm that your daily actions remain aligned with it. Life changes, and sometimes goals need adjusting as you learn more about yourself and your circumstances. This is not failure, this is refinement. What matters is that you never lose the habit of checking in with your direction, because a goal you have forgotten about cannot guide anything. Keep it in front of you. Keep breaking it into smaller steps. Keep returning to it after every setback. Winning rarely belongs to the most talented person in the room. It belongs to the person who stayed clear about what they wanted and refused to stop moving toward it, one focused step after another, long after everyone else had already given up. Chapter 5. Control your thoughts before they control your daily actions. Every action you take today began first as a thought, whether you noticed it happening or not. Before you spoke that harsh word, a thought passed through your mind. Before you skipped the workout, a thought convinced you it was fine to skip it. Before you snapped at someone you love, a thought stirred the irritation that eventually spilled out. Thoughts are the invisible architects of your entire life, quietly drawing the blueprint that your actions later follow. Most people spend their whole lives reacting to the output of this process, their words and choices, without ever examining the source that produced them. If you want different results in your life, you cannot only change your actions, you have to reach further upstream and change the thinking that produces those actions in the first place. Here is something important to understand. Not every thought that enters your mind deserves your obedience. A thought is simply a signal, a suggestion offered by your brain based on past experience, current mood, and whatever patterns it has learned to repeat. It is not a command you are required to follow. When a thought tells you that you are too tired to try, that you will fail anyway, that it is easier to give up, you are allowed to examine that thought before acting on it, rather than automatically letting it dictate your next move. The gap between a thought arriving and an action following it is where your real power lives. Most people close that gap instantly, moving straight from thought to behavior without any pause in between. Learning to control your thoughts means learning to widen that gap, even slightly, so you can choose your response instead of simply reacting to whatever thought happened to show up first. Unmanaged thinking tends to run in old grooves, the same worries, the same doubts, the same stories about who you are and what you are capable of, repeated so often that they start to feel like unquestionable fact. But repetition is not proof of truth. A thought you have had 10,000 times is not automatically correct simply because it feels familiar. Many of the beliefs limiting your daily actions right now were formed years ago, sometimes during a single painful moment, and have simply been repeating on autopilot ever since, without ever being questioned. You are allowed to question them. You are allowed to ask whether a thought is actually true, or whether it is simply old, worn, and unexamined. Self-talk shapes behavior more powerfully than most people realize, because the words you repeat to yourself internally become the lens through which you interpret everything that happens to you. If your internal voice constantly narrates your life with phrases like, "I always mess this up," or "nothing ever works out for me," your mind will start searching for evidence to confirm that story, ignoring anything that contradicts it. This is not wishful thinking or empty positivity. It is a practical reality of how attention works. Your mind cannot process everything happening around you at once, so it filters reality based on what it already expects to find. Change the internal narration, and you change what your mind starts noticing, which eventually changes what you believe is possible for yourself. One of the most practical tools for controlling your thoughts is catching yourself in the middle of a spiral before it fully takes hold. A spiral usually begins with one small negative thought, which triggers another related thought, which triggers another, until within a few minutes your mind has traveled from a minor inconvenience to a full imagined catastrophe. The way to interrupt this pattern is to notice it early, right at the first thought, before momentum builds. Ask yourself simply, is this thought helping me right now, or is it only making things heavier? This single question, asked consistently, trains your mind to stop feeding spirals the moment they begin, rather than letting them run their full destructive course. Reframing is another skill worth practicing daily. This does not mean pretending difficult situations are actually good, or forcing false positivity onto real problems. It means choosing to look at a situation from an angle that empowers you, rather than one that paralyzes you. A setback can be framed as proof that you are incapable, or it can be framed as information showing you what needs adjusting before you try again. Both framings are technically available in the exact same situation. The facts do not change, but the meaning you attach to those facts changes everything about how you respond afterward. Practicing this skill regularly, even with small daily frustrations, builds your capacity to reframe bigger challenges when they eventually arrive. Mental rehearsal is a technique often used by athletes, and it applies just as powerfully to everyday life. Before a difficult conversation, a demanding task, or a stressful event, take a few minutes to picture yourself moving through it calmly and effectively. This is not simply daydreaming. Your mind does not fully distinguish between vividly imagined experience and real experience when it comes to building familiarity and confidence. By mentally walking through a challenging situation beforehand, you reduce the shock of it when it actually arrives, because some part of your mind already recognizes it as something you have handled before, even if only in rehearsal. The environment around you also shapes your thinking more than most people acknowledge. The conversations you engage in, the content you consume, the people you spend the most time with, all of these continuously feed raw material into your mind, which your mind then uses to construct your thoughts. If you surround yourself with complaint, cynicism, and negativity, do not be surprised when your own thinking starts to mirror that same tone. Guarding your mental environment is not about isolating yourself from reality. It is about being intentional regarding what you allow to shape your inner world, since that inner world is directly responsible for the actions you take every single day. Controlling your thoughts is not about achieving a mind that never produces doubt, fear, or negativity again. That is not realistic, and chasing it will only frustrate you. The goal is far more practical than that. The goal is to build enough awareness that you notice unhelpful thoughts as they arrive, enough discipline to question them rather than obey them instantly, and enough practice reframing them that they lose their grip over your behavior. Every time you pause between a difficult thought and your next action, you are exercising a kind of quiet strength that compounds over time. Do this enough times, across enough days, and eventually you find that your thoughts stop dragging you around like an untrained animal on a leash. Instead, you become the one holding the leash, deciding which thoughts deserve to guide your actions and which ones deserve to simply pass by unanswered. Chapter 6. Build unstoppable discipline through simple morning and night routines. The way you begin your morning and the way you close your night carry more weight than almost any other habit in your life, because these two windows of time set the tone for everything that happens between them. Most people treat mornings as something to survive rather than something to shape, reaching for their phone within seconds of opening their eyes, letting notifications and other people's demands decide the direction of their day before they have even had a chance to think for themselves. By the time they sit up out of bed, their mind is already reacting instead of leading. A strong morning routine reverses this pattern. It gives you the first move, before the world gets a chance to make its own claims on your attention. The purpose of a morning routine is not to pack your early hours with as many activities as possible. It is to create a small window where you set your own direction before anyone else's noise enters your mind. This can be remarkably simple. Waking at a consistent time, drinking a glass of water, sitting quietly for a few minutes, moving your body even briefly, and reviewing what matters most for the day ahead. None of these actions require special equipment or extraordinary effort. Their power comes from repetition, not complexity. A simple routine performed daily will always outperform an elaborate routine performed occasionally, because consistency is what actually builds discipline, not the impressiveness of the routine itself. Waking at the same time each day, including weekends, does more for your discipline than almost any other single change you could make. Your body operates on rhythm, and when that rhythm stays consistent, everything else becomes easier. Your energy, your focus, your mood, your ability to fall asleep at night. Sleeping in irregular bursts might feel like rest, but it actually disrupts the internal clock your body relies on, leaving you groggier and less disciplined throughout the rest of your day. Choosing a wake time and honoring it consistently is one of the simplest yet most powerful acts of self-respect you can practice, because it tells your mind, from the very first moment of the day, that you are someone who keeps commitments to yourself. The first hour after waking deserves particular protection because whatever fills that hour tends to set the emotional tone for hours afterward. If the first thing you do is check messages filled with other people's problems, opinions, and demands, you begin your day already reacting to external pressure before you have had a single moment to check in with yourself. Instead, Use those early minutes for something that centers you. This might be a few minutes of quiet stillness, some light stretching, a short walk, or simply sitting with a warm drink while your mind slowly wakes up without external input flooding in. This is not indulgence, it is preparation. The same way an athlete stretches before a competition rather than walking straight from the locker room into full sprint. Movement in the morning, even brief movement, changes how your entire day unfolds. You do not need an intense workout to feel its benefits. A short walk, a few stretches, or several minutes of light exercise wakes up your body and signals to your mind that the day has officially begun with intention rather than drift. This small act of discipline early in the day tends to ripple outward, making other disciplined choices throughout the day feel more natural, because you have already proven to yourself, before most people are even out of bed, that you are capable of doing something hard, simply because you decided to. A few minutes spent reviewing your priorities before the day fully begins prevents you from being pulled entirely by whatever feels urgent once the demands of the day start arriving. Ask yourself simply, what matters most today? What would make this day feel meaningful by the time it ends? Write it down if possible. This does not need to be a long list. Often the most effective mornings are built around identifying just one or two things that truly matter, so that even if the rest of the day becomes chaotic, you still walk away having accomplished what actually counted. Night routines deserve just as much attention as morning ones, because how you close your day influences both the quality of your sleep and the mindset you carry into tomorrow. Many people spend their final waking hours consuming stimulating content, scrolling through screens filled with bright light and endless information, then wonder why their mind refuses to settle once they finally lie down. The hour before sleep should be treated as a gradual descent rather than an abrupt stop, giving your mind time to slow down instead of expecting it to switch off instantly after intense stimulation. Reflection at the end of the day is one of the most valuable habits you can build into your evening. Spend a few minutes reviewing what happened, what went well, what could have gone better, and what you are grateful for. This is not about harsh self-judgment. It is about honest awareness, the kind that allows you to make small adjustments moving forward instead of repeating the same patterns unconsciously. Writing this down, even briefly, gives your mind permission to release the day rather than carrying its unresolved threads into your sleep, where they often surface as restlessness or racing thoughts. Preparing for tomorrow the night before removes a significant amount of decision fatigue from your morning. Laying out what you need, planning your first few tasks, and setting a clear intention for the next day means you wake up already knowing your direction, rather than spending your limited morning energy figuring out where to begin. This small act of preparation is a quiet act of discipline because it requires you to think about your future self with care, giving them a smoother start instead of leaving them to scramble. The true power of morning and night routines lies not in any single action within them, but in the consistency of the entire structure, repeated day after day. A routine performed once means very little. A routine performed for 30 days begins reshaping how you experience your entire life, because you are no longer relying on motivation to decide how your days unfold. You have built a structure that carries you forward, even on days when motivation is completely absent. This is what unstoppable discipline actually looks like. Not intensity, not perfection, but a simple, steady framework that you return to every single day, regardless of how you feel, until it becomes so automatic that discipline stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like who you simply are. Chapter 7. Turn failure into fuel that pushes you toward growth. Failure feels personal in the moment it happens, as if the universe has singled you out to prove some quiet suspicion you have always carried about your own inadequacy. Your chest tightens, your face grows warm with embarrassment, and the mind rushes to explain what this failure says about who you are. But failure is not a verdict on your worth. It is simply information, feedback from reality, showing you that something in your approach needs adjusting. The people who eventually build remarkable lives are not the ones who avoided failure. They are the ones who kept walking through it, refusing to let one disappointing result define the entire story of what they were capable of becoming. Consider what failure actually represents when you strip away the emotional weight attached to it. It means you attempted something. It means you stepped beyond the boundary of what was safe and predictable into territory where outcomes were uncertain. This alone separates you from everyone who never tried at all, who stayed comfortable specifically because comfort guarantees no failure, but it also guarantees no growth. Failure is proof of effort, not proof of inadequacy. The only people who never fail are the people who never attempt anything worth failing at. The sting of failure comes largely from the stories we attach to it rather than the event itself. Losing a job can be interpreted as evidence that you are not good enough, or it can be interpreted as a redirection toward work better suited to your strengths. A relationship ending can be framed as proof that you are unlovable, or it can be framed as clarity about what you actually need in a partner. The event stays exactly the same in both interpretations, yet the meaning you assign to it completely changes how you move forward afterward. Learning to separate the raw event from the story you tell yourself about it is one of the most valuable skills you can develop, because that story is often more damaging than the failure itself. Every failure carries a lesson buried somewhere inside it, though that lesson rarely reveals itself immediately. In the raw aftermath, when emotions are still sharp, it can feel impossible to see anything valuable in what just happened. This is why reflection matters more than reaction. Give yourself time to move past the initial sting, then return to the situation with a calmer, more curious mind. Ask what specifically led to this outcome. Ask what you would do differently if given another attempt. Ask what this experience revealed about your preparation, your assumptions, or your approach. These questions turn failure from something that simply happened to you into something you actively extract value from. History is filled with people whose failures became the very foundation of their eventual success, not despite the failure, but because of what it taught them. Inventors tested countless approaches that did not work before finding the one that did. Each failed attempt narrowing down the possibilities until only the working solution remained. Entrepreneurs built businesses that collapsed, then used everything learned from that collapse to build something far stronger the second time. Athletes lost countless competitions before developing the skill and mental toughness required to eventually win. None of these people succeeded by avoiding failure. They succeeded by treating each failure as a data point, gathering enough of these data points until their approach finally aligned with what actually worked. There is a meaningful difference between failing and being a failure, though many people blur these two ideas together until they feel identical. Failing is an event, something that happened on a specific day, in a specific situation, under specific circumstances. Being a failure would require that event to define your entire identity, permanently, without room for change or growth. But identity is not fixed by a single moment. You are not the failure you experienced yesterday any more than you are the success you might experience tomorrow. You are the ongoing sum of how you respond to both, and that response remains entirely within your control, regardless of what already happened. Shame tends to isolate people after failure, convincing them that admitting the failure to others would only invite judgment and further embarrassment. But sharing your failures with the right people often reveals something surprising. Nearly everyone who has built something meaningful has a long list of failures behind them, and hearing these stories from others reminds you that failure is not some rare defect unique to you. It is a universal part of building anything worthwhile. Opening up about failure, rather than hiding it in silence, often removes much of its emotional weight, transforming it from a secret burden into simply one more chapter in a longer story still being written. Resilience after failure is built the same way physical strength is built, through repeated exposure that gradually increases your capacity to handle difficulty. The first failure you experience in any new area often feels devastating, disproportionate to the actual stakes involved. But each subsequent failure tends to sting a little less, not because the failures themselves become less significant, but because you have proven to yourself, through direct experience, that failure does not destroy you. You survived the last one. You learned something from it. You kept moving forward afterward. This accumulated evidence becomes armor against the fear of future failure, allowing you to take bigger risks with less hesitation than you once carried. The people who eventually reach the outcomes they were chasing almost always share one trait in common: an unwillingness to let failure become the final chapter of their attempt. They failed, adjusted, and tried again, sometimes many times over, refining their approach with each new attempt until something finally worked. This persistence is not about ignoring the lessons failure offers. It is about extracting those lessons fully, then applying them immediately, rather than retreating permanently. Quitting after failure only guarantees that the failure was the end of the story. Continuing after failure, informed by whatever that failure taught you, gives the story a chance to end somewhere entirely different. Failure will visit you again, more than once, throughout whatever you choose to pursue in this life. This is not a discouraging truth. It is simply the honest cost of attempting anything meaningful. What matters is not preventing failure from ever happening again, an impossible standard that would only paralyze you into inaction. What matters is deciding, each time failure arrives, that it will serve as fuel rather than as an ending. Extract the lesson, adjust your approach, move forward again, carrying the wisdom that failure, uncomfortable as it is, was quietly working the entire time to build the exact strength and clarity you needed to eventually succeed. Chapter 8. Master your emotions so stress never controls your decisions. Stress has a way of narrowing your vision until the only thing you can see is the immediate threat in front of you, whether that threat is real danger or simply a difficult email waiting in your inbox. In this narrowed state, decisions get made from a place of urgency rather than clarity, and urgency rarely produces your best thinking. The words spoken in anger, the choices made in panic, the relationships damaged during moments of overwhelming pressure, these are rarely decisions a calm mind would have made. Mastering your emotions does not mean eliminating stress from your life, because stress is simply part of being alive in a world that constantly presents challenges. It means learning to make decisions from a place of steadiness, even while stress is present, rather than letting stress hijack the wheel entirely. Emotions themselves are not the enemy, despite how often people treat them that way. Anger, fear, sadness, and frustration all carry useful information, signals pointing towards something that matters to you, something that needs attention or protection. The problem is not that these emotions exist. The problem arises when they take complete control of your behavior without any pause for conscious thought in between. An emotion that simply informs you is valuable. An emotion that completely dictates your next action, without any filter, often leads to outcomes you regret once the intensity has passed. Learning to feel your emotions fully while still choosing your response deliberately is the exact skill that separates emotional mastery from emotional chaos. The body reacts to stress before the mind fully understands what is happening, which is why physical awareness becomes such a powerful early warning system. A tightening chest, clenched jaw, shallow breathing. These physical signs often appear seconds before the emotional reaction fully takes over your thinking. If you train yourself to notice these signals early, you gain a crucial window of opportunity to intervene before the emotion completely overwhelms your judgment. This is not about suppressing what you feel. It is about catching the wave just as it begins forming, rather than being swept entirely underwater by the time you finally notice it. Breath remains one of the most immediate tools available for interrupting a stress response in real time, because it directly influences your nervous system rather than simply your thoughts about the situation. When stress hits, breathing naturally becomes fast and shallow, which sends a signal throughout your body confirming that danger is present, even in situations where no actual danger exists. Deliberately slowing your breath, taking longer exhales than inhales, tells your nervous system the opposite. It signals safety, even amid genuine difficulty, and this signal alone can shift you from a reactive state back toward a state where clear thinking becomes possible again. Practicing this during small moments of daily frustration builds the skill needed to access it during larger crises later. Creating space between a triggering event and your response is perhaps the single most valuable habit you can build for emotional mastery. In the heat of a stressful moment, the gap between what happens and how you react can feel non-existent, as if the reaction simply happens automatically without any choice involved. But that gap exists, even if it currently feels invisible to you. Training yourself to pause, even for a few seconds, before responding to something stressful, gives your rational mind time to catch up with your emotional reaction. A short pause before replying to an upsetting message, a few breaths before responding to criticism, a brief walk before making a decision while angry. These small delays often prevent choices that would otherwise cause lasting damage. Naming your emotion accurately, rather than simply feeling overwhelmed by a vague storm of unpleasant sensation, reduces its intensity in a way that surprises most people the first time they try it. Instead of simply feeling bad, ask yourself specifically what you are feeling. Is this frustration, disappointment, fear, or exhaustion? Each of these emotions calls for a different response, and lumping them all together into a single, undefined feeling of stress makes it much harder to address what is actually happening. The simple act of putting language around an emotion activates a different part of your brain than the part generating the raw emotional reaction, which naturally begins calming the intensity even before you have solved the underlying problem. Perspective offers another powerful tool for managing stress, though it requires deliberate practice to access it in the moment, rather than only in hindsight. When you are in the middle of a stressful situation, it often feels as though this moment will define everything that follows, as though the stakes are impossibly high and permanent. Yet if you look back at stressful moments from your past, most of them have faded significantly in importance, resolved themselves, or became simply another chapter in a much longer story. Asking yourself how much this situation will matter in a year, or even in 5 years, often reveals that the intensity you are feeling right now is temporary, even if it does not feel that way while you are inside it. Physical state directly influences emotional resilience, which means the foundation for handling stress well is built long before any stressful moment actually arrives. Poor sleep, skipped meals, and a body depleted from lack of movement all lower your capacity to regulate emotion effectively. This means part of mastering your emotions involves taking care of the physical vessel carrying those emotions in the first place. A well-rested, well-nourished body handles stress with far more steadiness than one running on empty, regardless of how much emotional discipline you believe you possess. Recovery after an emotional moment matters just as much as how you handle the moment itself. Even with practice, there will be times when stress gets the better of you, when you react in ways you later wish you had not. This does not mean the work has failed. It means you are human, engaged in an ongoing practice, rather than a perfected state you achieve once and keep forever. What matters most is what happens afterward, whether you take time to understand what triggered the reaction, whether you repair any damage caused by it, and whether you carry the lesson forward into the next similar situation. Mastery is built through this cycle repeated many times, not through never stumbling at all. Emotional mastery is not about becoming cold or detached from what you feel. It is about developing enough awareness and enough tools that stress no longer gets to make your decisions for you without your consent. You will still feel frustration, fear, and pressure because these are simply part of being alive and engaged with a world that matters to you. But between that feeling and your next action, you now have the ability to pause, to breathe, to choose a response aligned with who you actually want to be, rather than one dictated entirely by whatever emotional storm happened to be passing through in that particular moment. Chapter 9. Stay consistent even when motivation disappears completely from you. Motivation is a visitor that comes and goes as it pleases, arriving unannounced on some mornings, filling you with energy and enthusiasm, then disappearing without warning on others, leaving you staring at the same task you were excited about just days earlier, now feeling nothing but resistance. If you build your entire life around waiting for this visitor to show up before you take action, you will spend enormous stretches of time doing nothing at all, because motivation was never designed to be reliable. It is a feeling, and feelings shift constantly based on sleep, mood, weather, stress, and 100 other factors mostly outside your control. The people who accomplish meaningful things across their lifetime are not the ones who feel motivated more often than everyone else. They are the ones who learn to act regardless of whether motivation showed up that day. Understanding the difference between motivation and discipline changes everything about how you approach consistency. Motivation is the spark, the initial burst of enthusiasm that gets you excited about starting something new. Discipline is the structure that keeps you going long after that spark has faded, which it always eventually does. Anyone can act when they feel inspired. The real test, the one that actually determines whether you build the life you want, happens on the ordinary days when you feel nothing special at all, when the task ahead feels boring, difficult, or simply unappealing, and you choose to do it anyway. This choice, repeated enough times, becomes the foundation everything meaningful gets built upon. Waiting for motivation before acting creates a dangerous trap because it teaches your mind that action only happens under ideal emotional conditions. This means every single day you feel less than enthusiastic becomes a day where nothing gets done, and since most days are ordinary rather than exceptional, this pattern quickly adds up to enormous stretches of stalled progress. Breaking this trap requires reversing the order most people assume is necessary. Instead of waiting to feel motivated before acting, act first and allow motivation to follow behind, if it decides to show up at all. Many times, the simple act of beginning, even without enthusiasm, generates a small amount of energy that grows once you are already moving. Starting is almost always harder than continuing, and discipline exists specifically to get you past that initial resistance. Systems accomplish what motivation alone never could, because a well-built system does not require you to feel a particular way in order to function. If your habit depends entirely on feeling excited, it will collapse the moment excitement fades, which is inevitable. But if your habit is built into a structure, tied to a specific time, a specific trigger, a specific place, it continues operating almost automatically, regardless of your emotional state on any given day. Exercising immediately after waking, writing during the same hour every morning, reviewing your goals every night before bed. These routines succeed not because you feel motivated each time you perform them, but because they have become simply what you do, independent of how you feel about doing them. There is a particular kind of quiet pride that comes from showing up specifically on the days when you did not feel like it. Anyone can point to the days they performed well while feeling energized and inspired. Far fewer people can point to the ordinary, unremarkable days where nothing about the moment felt special, yet they still followed through anyway. These are the days that actually build your identity as someone disciplined, because discipline is not proven during easy moments. It is proven during resistance. Each time you push through a lack of motivation and complete the task regardless, you strengthen your belief that you are someone who follows through on commitments, regardless of mood. This belief becomes a kind of momentum of its own, separate from motivation entirely, built instead on evidence of your own consistent behavior. Lowering the bar during low motivation days, rather than abandoning the habit entirely, keeps the chain of consistency unbroken without demanding unrealistic effort from yourself on days when energy is genuinely low. If your usual workout is an hour, but motivation has completely vanished, do 10 minutes instead of nothing. If your usual writing session produces a full page but today feels impossible, write 2 sentences instead of none. The specific quantity matters far less than the unbroken continuation of the habit itself. Consistency is built through never fully stopping, not through maintaining identical intensity every single day, regardless of circumstances. A smaller version of the habit still keeps the pattern alive, while skipping entirely risks the pattern unraveling completely. Remembering your original reason for starting something offers a different kind of fuel than motivation, one that tends to be more stable and less dependent on momentary feeling. Motivation fluctuates based on mood, but purpose runs deeper than mood, connected to something you actually care about, beyond the immediate discomfort of the task in front of you. When you feel completely uninspired to continue toward a goal, pause and reconnect with why that goal mattered to you in the first place. This reconnection will not necessarily make the task feel exciting again, but it often provides enough grounding to keep moving forward anyway, because the goal itself still matters, even on the days when the process of pursuing it feels tedious. Community and accountability provide external support during the inevitable stretches when internal motivation runs completely dry. Sharing your commitment with someone you trust, or surrounding yourself with people pursuing similar goals, creates a structure where showing up becomes about more than just your own fluctuating feelings. Knowing someone else is expecting you, checking in with you, or working alongside you toward a similar target adds a layer of consistency that pure internal willpower sometimes struggles to maintain alone, especially during long stretches where progress feels invisible and enthusiasm has completely faded. There will be entire weeks, sometimes even longer, where you feel absolutely nothing resembling motivation toward the goals you have set for yourself. This is not a sign that something has gone wrong or that you have chosen the wrong path. It is simply the natural rhythm of pursuing anything over an extended period of time. Motivation was never meant to sustain a long journey on its own. It arrives in bursts, fades away, and sometimes returns unexpectedly, completely outside your control. What remains constant, what actually determines whether you reach the destination you set out for, is your willingness to keep showing up during the stretches when that spark is nowhere to be found. Discipline built during these quiet, unmotivated stretches becomes the very foundation strong enough to carry you the rest of the way, long after motivation alone would have left you stranded far short of where you intended to go. Chapter 10. Create the future you want through daily disciplined choices. The future you are living toward right now is not waiting somewhere out in the distance, separate from today, ready to arrive fully formed on some later date. It is being built right now, in this exact moment, through the choice you are making about how to spend the next hour of your life. This is a difficult truth for many people to fully absorb, because it removes the comfortable illusion that transformation happens through some single dramatic turning point. There is no arrival date circled on a calendar where your future self simply appears. That future self is being constructed daily, brick by brick, through choices so small they often seem insignificant in the moment they are made. Most people picture their future as something that happens to them rather than something they actively construct. They imagine circumstances changing, luck arriving, someone else opening a door they have been waiting for. But the truth, though less comfortable, is also far more empowering. Your future is overwhelmingly the product of what you repeatedly choose to do today, this week, this month. The direction of an entire life can shift dramatically, not through one enormous decision, but through the quiet accumulation of ordinary decisions repeated consistently over a long stretch of time. This means the power to shape your future has never actually been outside your reach. It has been sitting inside your daily choices the entire time, waiting for you to recognize it. Every choice you make carries a kind of vote for the type of person you are becoming. Choosing to read instead of scroll casts a vote for someone who values growth. Choosing to speak honestly instead of avoiding a difficult conversation casts a vote for someone who values integrity. Choosing to show up for a commitment, even when you would rather stay home, casts a vote for someone who values reliability. No single vote determines the outcome entirely, but enough votes cast in the same direction eventually decide the election. You are, at this very moment, in the middle of an ongoing election for who you will become, and every choice today contributes to that final result. The distance between where you currently stand and the future you want can feel discouraging when viewed as one enormous gap that must somehow be crossed all at once. This discouragement often leads to paralysis because the size of the gap feels impossible to close through anything you could realistically do today. But no meaningful distance has ever been crossed in a single step. It is crossed through a long sequence of individual steps, each one small enough to actually take, each one moving you slightly closer than you were before. Focus your attention not on the entire distance remaining, but on the next single step directly in front of you. This shift in focus transforms an overwhelming journey into something manageable, something you can actually begin today rather than postponing indefinitely while waiting to feel ready for the whole thing at once. Discipline is what allows these small steps to accumulate into something significant, because discipline is what keeps you moving forward on the days when inspiration has nothing to offer and the outcome still feels far away. Without discipline, most people take a few steps toward their desired future, encounter difficulty or boredom, and quietly drift back toward whatever felt familiar and comfortable before. With discipline, the steps continue regardless of how the process feels in any particular moment, and it is precisely this continuation, sustained over months and years, that eventually produces a future dramatically different from where you started. Consider how compound growth works with anything sustained over time, whether that is money, skill, knowledge, or physical strength. In the early stages, progress often feels painfully slow, almost invisible, leading many people to question whether their effort is actually producing anything worthwhile. But growth built through consistent daily choices tends to follow a pattern where the visible results lag significantly behind the actual effort being invested. Then, often after a long stretch that felt unrewarding, the results begin appearing rapidly, almost as if arriving out of nowhere, even though they were actually earned gradually across all those earlier, quieter days. Trusting this pattern, even during the invisible stretch, is essential for anyone serious about building a meaningfully different future. The choices that shape your future rarely announce themselves as significant in the moment they happen. Deciding to wake up on time instead of hitting snooze does not feel like a life-altering decision. Choosing to have a difficult but honest conversation instead of avoiding it does not feel monumental while it is happening. Yet these small, unremarkable choices, repeated across enough days, become the actual architecture of the life you eventually find yourself living. This means you do not need to wait for some grand, obvious opportunity to start shaping your future. That shaping is already available to you today, hidden inside choices that look completely ordinary on the surface. It helps to occasionally picture your future self clearly, not as a vague wish, but as someone specific, living a specific kind of life, having built specific skills and relationships through specific daily habits. This person did not appear through luck or sudden transformation. They appeared because someone, meaning you, made a long series of disciplined choices that gradually built them into existence. When you picture this future self with enough clarity, your current choices start to feel less like isolated decisions and more like direct contributions towards someone you are actively constructing. This connection between present action and future identity makes discipline feel less like sacrifice and more like investment. There will be days when the future you are building feels distant enough that today's effort seems almost pointless, disconnected from any visible reward. This feeling is normal, and it does not mean your effort is wasted. It simply means you are in the middle of the process, in the stretch where growth remains largely invisible, still accumulating beneath the surface, even though nothing dramatic appears to be happening yet. Continue anyway. Show up for the version of yourself who does not exist yet, but is depending entirely on the choices you make today to eventually come into being. The future is not something that happens to you. It is something you build quietly through the accumulation of daily disciplined choices that rarely feel significant in isolation but become extraordinarily powerful when sustained over time. You do not need permission to begin building it, and you do not need to wait for perfect conditions or overwhelming motivation before starting. The next choice in front of you, however small it seems, is already a brick in that structure. Lay it with intention. Then lay the next one tomorrow. This is how an entire life, disciplined and meaningful, eventually gets built. One deliberate choice after another, until one day you look back and recognize the person those choices quietly created.